So we're now going to move on to exploiting information to improve health and well-being. And we have two great presentations to share with you. The first is going to be by Professor George Crooks, who is the Chief Executive of the Digital Health and Care Institute in Scotland. And he is going to be trying to answer, I'm sure he will answer, the question, what happened to the person in person-centred care? George.
Great, thank you very much. You could have been a bit more enthusiastic. You know, I've come a long way to speak to you. It was sunny in Edinburgh when I left. It was 72 Fahrenheit. The sun was shining. Oh, who the hell is that? I apologise for my appearance on the screen. My wife said I was built for radio, and she's absolutely right. Right, that's the humour over. It's now going to get incredibly serious. So what happened to the person in person-centred care? And I'm not just talking about patients, I'm not just talking about service users, I'm not simply talking about carers, I'm talking about everybody who's involved in health and social care, be that providers, deliverers, or even the tech industry. I'm talking about everybody, because it's a pretty tough gig for us all. It actually feels like this. Governments and organisations do firmly believe that they've given us the tools to do the job. And it's a bit like, here's a bridge, you just get across the river, guys, everything is going to be fine. And the reality is that the tools that we've got today are not fit for purpose. They're not fit for the world in which we live. They're not fit to interact with people who are using technology day to day in how they run their own lives. We need to give people additional resources, and those additional resources aren't necessarily money. They could be time, they could be training, they could be the redesign of organizational and operational processes and procedures. It could be clinical decision support. It could certainly be digital tools and services. It could also be innovative procurement methods, because for those of you in the audience from industry, trying to get an audience within the NHS, let alone sell a product to the NHS anywhere in the UK, is nigh on impossible. So what do we need? Well, I'm going to share some of that with you during my presentation, but the one thing that I would say is we need brave leadership. Leadership is fundamentally important, and that is at a political level, at a managerial level, at a clinical level within the health service, and with a senior management level within the social care and local authority sector. Because this is our environment, this is just an example of one health board in Scotland's NHS Grampian. It just shows that demand for A&E services continues year on year. Now, what is really interesting is the number of people who present with accidents or injury. It hasn't changed. It sits about 16%. The totality of the increase in demand is made up of over 80-year-olds. And that's the same across England. So what does that actually mean? Well, what it means is this. It means that all these things are having an effect. This is the only highly technical slide that I have. Just to demonstrate that I am the Chief Executive of an Innovation Centre, one of the slides moves. But we've got an ageing society. Paul mentioned that earlier. We've got the increase in long-term conditions. People now not only have one long-term condition, they have 2, 3, 4, or even 5 or more. We've really not recovered from the financial global credit crunch of over 10 years ago. And in the UK, health inequalities is still a major issue. The difference between the haves and the have-nots is as stark today as it was 5, 10, 20 years ago. And we are absolutely hopeless at workforce planning. We've either got too many nurses, not enough nurses, too many pharmacists, not enough pharmacists, and so on and so forth. It goes, if we could only use data properly, life would be a lot simpler. But none of these problems are new. In fact, a number of people, including myself, will sit around many tables and we talk about it all the time. But nothing ever seems to happen. And why is that? because of the inbuilt inertia we have. People know the words, but people don't compute what the words actually mean. And we need to cut through that. And it's no different since the Industrial Revolution or since horse-drawn trams were replaced by buses. People said, these will never last. They're unreliable, they're noisy, they break down. If we only put an extra 2 horses in the front of that and made the carriage a bit bigger, we can cope with the increasing demands over the months and years ahead. Does that sound familiar? Because that's what we do within local authorities and the NHS every year when it comes to winter. Rather than transforming how we offer services, we actually open wards, we buy more clinical time, we spend millions of pounds making do, and strangely enough, the problem returns to bite us in the backside year after year. So I'm a great advert for weight reduction. I was built for strong winds. But actually, believe it or not, I've lost 1.5 stone and I'm continuing to do that because I'm being supported this time by technology. So I'm a great advocate for technology. It's a very wise investment, but who is most of the beneficiaries of technology within the NHS and social care? And certainly from an NHS point of view, over the last 25, 30 years, most technology has either been designed to support the people who work in the service or the organisations that deliver care, and the patients have been the passive recipients. It's only really in the last 5 to 7 years that there's beginning to be meaningful investment in citizen-facing digital health and care solutions. So this is right. What about me? What about me, the patient? What about me, the carer? What about me, the service user? But actually, it's not really about her because she's technology-enabled. Everybody uses this example of why we shouldn't be using technology, but over 70% of the elderly people in the UK want to use technology. They want that technology to be designed in a way that's accessible for them and easy to use, and they want supported in using it. That is not beyond the wit of man. And that's what my organisation, we are the National Innovation Centre for Digital Health and Care in Scotland, are designed to do, because it's really not about the technology. It's all about people. But it's not about the faceless majority. It's about how you make each individual feel special within a crowd. And the global technology businesses have learned how to do that. It's called personalization. But we are slow to jump in the bandwagon in health and care. We need to be smarter. And it takes me back to a quote by this guy called William Osler. Most of you won't know who he is. He was a US physician. He actually transformed medical education, the way we train doctors. And what he did was, the way they trained doctors at the end of 1890, beginning of the 20th century, was it was all done in lecture theatres by erudite, grey-haired professors teaching students the practice of medicine. William Osler took the students out of the lecture theatre into the hospitals. And that is his quote. And he basically said, patients are the most important thing. Now, I would say to you, patients and service users, but equally their carers, are important. Yet do we give them their voice? Sometimes when we talk about person-centred care, it is simply to tick a managerial box. And I would like to put it to you that technology is the great enabler. It is the way of putting the patient, the service user, the citizen, their family, their carers, truly at the centre of what they do. So our vision within our Innovation Centre is that innovation, clearly, in digital health and care will help Scotland's people live longer, healthier lives, but it's also about economic growth. We know globally the digital health sector is growing year on year. So the UK wants and needs part of that action. The digital health market in the UK is £2.9 billion by the end of this year, so people say. But what does that really mean? It really means that the technology sector are going to be one of the key new industries that the UK will have to base its economic strategy for the future. So we did a piece of work to try to understand the skills requirement in the Scottish digital health sector, and I think the findings are transferable to England. So we did desk-based research, but we also went out and consulted with those involved. What we found was there was a great diversity of job roles within the digital health sector, and there's probably no surprises in most of that list. Software, hardware developers, user experience assistants, user support staff, business analysts, and so on and so forth. But librarians and knowledge managers are said to be equally as important. When we talked to the companies involved, we asked them what the top 10 skills were that they required, and there you have them: software development, project management, right through to business intelligence skills, web design experience, and so on. Again, no real surprises in that list. But when we looked at the size and growth rate by digital health sector in the UK, we found something that was quite interesting. The largest sector in the UK is round about digital health systems. That's electronic health records, e-prescriptions, and so on. Telecare is second in the running there. But the emerging markets, where there's going to be significant growth over the next 3 to 5 years, in wearables and software applications and health analytics, we are still slow, but we need to get faster. And this was really insightful to me. The hardest skill combination that industry has to get hold of in the UK are IT expertise combined with knowledge and understanding of health and care. We need more of these individuals, and they don't happen just by accident. We need to plan. Now, in Scotland, 15 of our 19 universities offer ICT courses. We've now got over 8,000 ICT graduates in 2018. All our colleges offer ICT courses. We've got 3 purpose-built digital health MSc programs, rising to 10 this year. But there's no undergraduate provision, formal provision in digital health. We then looked at the other end. The unemployment rate of all computer science graduates was amongst the highest of all degree courses from our universities. 29% of university ICT graduates and 90% of college graduates remain unemployed 6 months after graduation. And the reason for that is the skills that our universities and colleges are giving to our young, aspiring technologists of the future doesn't meet the requirements of industry. Employers found that graduates often lacked work experience, commercial awareness. They didn't have soft skills, and they had insufficient technical knowledge of the type that companies were looking for. So we've made a series of recommendations to our government. Review the existing education and training provision for digital health. There needs to be better alignment and more collaboration between digital health industry and the education sector. And we need to raise the profile of digital health in Scotland. And I guess these lessons are the same across the whole of the UK. And the government in Scotland are listening to this. But if we're serious, we need to do it, and we need to do it now. The other bugbear I've got is this. If anybody else tells me that giving us as individuals access to our own data is said in a way that it's going to be the salvation of the health and care system in the UK, I think I'll throw myself out a window. Because data is only data. If we don't turn that data into information, if we don't present it in a form that is accessible, understandable, and usable by our citizens, if we don't give them the digital tools and services to act on what that information is telling them, we have failed. And for an organization, it's not about data. It's not even about information. It's about intelligence. And if we learn nothing else but these things, then we will empower people. Because simply by giving people access to data and telling them to make their own way ain't going to work. Poor dog. You wouldn't know how long it took me to set up that picture. But the other thing is this. We are almost drowning in a sea of data. We've moved from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Everything. If you look at that graph, PCs are actually relatively small in number, as are mobile devices. More and more things are getting connected to the net. But unless we plan now as to what we're going to do with that data, that is going to be what we will have. A complete mess. And the other thing we need to understand and we need to move forward with now is, how do we trust data? We've got a good idea about how we trust the devices, but we need to be able to trust the data as it flows through our systems, across our exchange layers and our firewalls into public sector and back again. And we need to work that out, and we need to do it this year and next year, not in 5 to 7 to 10